Welcome to the Working Without Waste podcast, powered by ERC Midwest, the podcast that's all about sharing ideas and stories that increase your productivity and decrease waste in your business and personal life. I'm your host, Mike Malatesta, one of the leaders at ERC Midwest, and today I've got Dave Stamm on the show. Dave is the CEO and founder of Stamm Technologies and Stamm Media. And today we're going to talk about outsourced and managed IT services. And maybe if we have some time, we're going to get into the media part as well, which is really quite interesting. So Dave, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me on, Mike. Very excited.
So Dave, why don't we start with just a sort of a thumbnail of who you are, how you got started, and what Stamm Technologies is all about.
Sounds great. It actually ties together because we're still about what I started a while back. So in college, the quick story is I worked for Apple Computer in college my sophomore year, and I basically sold Macs to the universities in the Midwest and to students. It was more of a sales and marketing role, but since I was going to school for IT, Apple actually let me kind of help implement some of the systems at the universities. And this is back in the 90s. So the universities weren't necessarily all pro Mac, and Apple wasn't the brand it is today. And in doing that, there was a company who was nearby. I went to UW Whitewater, and there was a company nearby who needed some computer support. And they approached this university and said, hey, is there anybody there at the university that could help? And they said, well, why don't you call Dave? I reached back to them, and they were asking me to come out. I said, oh, I can't. I can only do work for Apple for the universities and for students. And they kept calling me. They were professionally persistent, let's say. And they just kept calling. Every few days, they would call and ask me for help. And finally, I said, look, guys, I'm happy to try to help you out. Let me just come over there. Well, I went over there, and what they needed me to do was actually, for me, wasn't too bad. It wasn't, I'm a sophomore in college. I'm in IT with some basic IT stuff. And they were super happy. Like, oh my gosh, thanks so much for helping us out. And so they just kept calling me back. And so I kind of had this side job where I would help them out. And within about 6 months to a year, my next summer break, I decided I was going to, kind of strike out on my own. And they were kind enough to give me some client referrals. And we're still with those clients today. So that first client we've been with them now 27 years. And they're still one of our active clients. We actually have some staff. Some of our staff is at their office in Chicago. They have an office in Chicago and an office in Elkhorn. And we've got some of our staff in their Chicago office today. So our goal in the beginning was always to use technology to help people do better business. And that's really still what we're focused on today.
Okay. If you want to learn more about Dave, by the way, you can... We did a great episode on the How Did Happen podcast, episode number 116, and if you go there, you will get just a really great look at a great entrepreneur who's accomplished so much and overcome so many challenges too. It's really inspirational. So I do encourage you to check that out if you get a chance. Dave, I guess let's just start with what managed IT services really is, because I think everybody sort of has a general idea of call the tech guys sort of thing, but I learned about IT services and started working with your firm really as an offshoot to having hired someone that as an IT professional that I as an entrepreneur and kind of business owner, I thought, oh, I got that bucket handled. I've hired my person, and if you have anything wrong, you call Jeff. And turns out that while Jeff had a lot of skill sets, he was not able. He didn't know everything, and so we ended up having to not only have Jeff but also have other help, which is how we ended up and started working with you. So, what is that typical? Is that how it normally happens, or what? Explain it in a way that everybody can understand it.
Well, great question. So I will give you two versions of the answer. One is what our industry sees as fixed IT, and we kind of have our own twist on it, as I'm sure all of our competitors do as well. But fixed IT basically is where a company of any size would pay a firm like us a fee. Usually it's a fixed fee to kind of come in and own the IT function for them. So they'll take care of the servers, the network, the users, the employees, kind of everything under the roof. They will cover for some fixed amount and make sure that everything's running in top shape. And the idea behind it is really that you're both in it together, right? If there's a fixed amount, if something goes wrong or there's pain, the pain is felt by both parties, right? The company's having issues and they don't want to have issues, and the IT company doesn't want to be throwing a bunch of hours at something when they're getting a fixed amount. And that's basically that's the idea behind it. And managed services started, 10 to 15 years ago, somewhere in that time frame. So, but I will tell you, the real reason that the industry started that approach was because everybody was trying to get more per billable hour, right? So they're trying to figure out, hey, if we got people, signing on a fixed approach, how can we get up our billable hour without kind of calling attention to it? And I think that's where the idea came from in our industry. Somebody was trying to figure out how to kind of, ratchet up the profit margin. So that being said, is we take a bit of a different approach, and I know some others do as well. And our approach is that we still want we want the pluses of that model, right? So we look at it and say, a client would hire us to own the IT function. And that may be a different story per client. It may be a firm that's got one or two IT people, and we're just coming in to help them with things they're not familiar with, to make the IT team shine, not to be competitive to them, but just to come in and help with projects that are outside of their scope. Or maybe they're going on vacation and it's a small business with one person, and that person's going away for a week or two for their honeymoon or whatever, and they just want us to cover for the time they're gone. Or it might be companies that have no IT resources, and we come in then and kind of take on that whole, we do own the entire IT function. But we look at it as in terms of, some of our clients are on fixed amounts because it worked for them, and some of our clients just still pay us hourly depending. And so we really just try to be adaptable and easy to work with to kind of fill in whatever gaps the client needs. And everybody, has a different approach that would work for them. And so we just try to be the glue in whatever they need to make sure that their IT is running efficiently and serves their business.
And you mentioned as you were talking there about a retainer and sharing the pain, and I'm not sure that I understood. I mean, I understand what a retainer is, but I talk.
Sure.
Explain better the share the pain between the client and you.
So the idea in the managed service industry is that you'll pay a managed provider a total fixed price per month, not even a retainer per se. You might just pay whatever that amount is. You pay a fixed amount, and the idea then is that the IT company will own the IT for you for that fixed amount, right? And so on the advantage of the client side, they're paying one amount. It doesn't vary, and so they know what it is, and they assume then that the IT company is handling their IT effectively, which hopefully they are. On the IT company, the advantage is that they're getting a fixed amount every month, but then the IT company's goal really is to keep that client working as efficiently as they can, but putting as least amount of labor into it as they need to, right? So most of the time, not all providers, but most of the time, people are it's less visits on site because there's no travel and trip charges and everything else. So they try to avoid on site. And again, it's you're putting enough in to keep them happy, but you don't want to put too much in because then you put too much time against your fixed amount and it doesn't work for them either. And so it's this we found it to be kind of this weird conundrum. And so we like some of the pros of it for the clients, right? And we've always just taken the approach, if you do what's right by your clients, they'll stay with you for a very long time and they tell their friends. And that's really kind of just the general approach that we take in life. And so for us, we started looking at the model and said, well, this doesn't seem to really work for all of our clients. The monthly fees would be high and the clients don't need all this stuff. And, if they call and use us, and some of our smaller clients use us and they just need us on an hourly basis, they might be paying only half of what they would have paid for the fixed amount. And that may work for them. Mm-hmm. So we really came back and said, look, we have both models, and we basically work with the clients to figure out which one is right for them, and whatever one they pick, and that'll be right for us in the end as well. So that's kind of how we look at it.
So let's get into the decision-making process on the client end. So I'm imagining most people listening are kind of like me, and I don't mean that in any way except this. I I know how to use my IT. But when I don't know how to anticipate what I need. I don't know how to fix what goes wrong. I don't know what I should be asking, what I shouldn't be asking. I don't know what my expectations should be. So, as a result, if someone comes along and they quote unquote speak IT, I think to myself, oh, okay, well, they must know what they're doing. Um, so I feel like I'm not in a good position to make great choices when it comes to it. So I'm wondering what, if you're on the buying end, what are the differentiators, Dave, that go into making the right choice for someone to handle your IT, managed IT?
That's a great question. I would say, if I was on the other side of the table looking at this, so before I answer your question, so first off, we kind of take a look at it and, with clients and even in the first meetings, sometimes people are like, well, we're 100 people strong and we're trying to figure out if we're going to hire a full-time person or we're going to outsource it or a hybrid of both, right? And the truth is when I first get there, I don't know either. I need to ask them questions and I need to understand, what does their business look like to try to figure out honestly, what are their expectations? Are they running, 3 shifts of manufacturing? Is it, what really what do they have under the roof and what are the needs and expectations of technology? How do they view technology? Is it just an expense? Is everything automated and all process driven? It's not even by the size sometimes of the company is kind of what they do. But anyway, I guess my answer would be, is really, you have to ask the right questions in terms of, ask them who they're serving, what is their business model, what does a day in the life look like of support? So, so when our team needs things, what's the process on your side of the IT company for the response? And how do you own the bigger things? How do you handle the server, the applications, what's stored in the cloud? How is the strategy delivered? Even in small businesses with 5, 10, 20, 30 people, those companies still need strategy. And how is that handled and how is that brought to the table? What type of proactive nature is involved in the process with the IT firm? And then honestly, I think, and it may be, maybe it's just a Milwaukee thing, is right. We all like to investigate and explore, but I think a big piece too is just to ask. It's a lot of times asking for references, right? It's in some ways we're like IT is like hiring an accounting firm or a law firm, right? It's hard to look at an ad in the yellow pages or anywhere and just decide that you're going to pick an IT firm, an accounting firm, or a law firm. And a lot of times, you may find someone you like, but you're going to reach out to talk to some of their referrals and existing clients, and then ask them some really deep questions about how things have gone. How long have you been with them, and what's the process, and here's the model they said, and do they follow it, and things like that, to see if it would be a good fit for your business.
And when it comes to strategy, is part of your process when you sit down with someone sort of not just understanding, where we've come from, where we are today, but, figuring out or helping them figure out, okay, here's where we are today. Here's where we should probably be, or we would like to be, 1 year, 3 year, 5 years down the road. I'm not sure how much further you can go because things change so quickly, but I'm curious what that discussion is like.
Yeah, it's a great question. So, in that for us is a visioning exercise. And once we do some visioning with the client to see what it is, we can actually break it down into pieces, right? So, for those of us in traction, it's like our rocks and our to-dos. And so very similar on the IT front, right? We have to understand and build a vision with the client, which we might end up working on together. And then we can back it into something smaller. So we typically ask our clients to meet on a quarterly basis. Some of our smaller clients maybe twice a year or even only once a year. But we have a strategic meeting to talk about these pieces. And then what we do is we hold a rolling budget. And so I call it a rolling budget because usually part of the vision is understanding even things like life cycle of their computers. And again, these are things that big companies all implement, but small businesses don't necessarily always do, but it's not necessarily hard to do. So what I mean by that is maybe we decide collectively, the client and us decide that they're going to keep all their employees are going to have the same computer for 4 years. And roughly, with maybe some exceptions, the employees will get new computers at the end of 4 years. So, but the problem is in small businesses, often it's not tracked. So we see ourselves as, since we are owning the IT function for most of our clients, that we should be handling that, and we should be coming and saying, hey, look, it's in our quarterly meeting, okay, we're here. Now, we had on the docket that we would be replacing these 5 computers this quarter. Do we still want to do that? And the answer might be, hey, right now we're in the middle of a pandemic and our business is very slow, so there's no chance we can buy those computers. Totally a fair answer. It doesn't mean we have to execute, but at least we're bringing it to the table to say to the client, this was what the plan was. We can totally modify and change the plan, but we want to make sure you knew what the plan was. And then the client can decide. Maybe they're going to be taking on a big new project for one of their big clients, and they just say, you know what? We want to actually execute the next 2 quarters now because we need all of our employees, our key employees, to be on the fastest machines they can be to take on this big project. But then we might slow down the pace in the 3rd quarter of the year or something. So it's all those type of conversations that are had. It's coming up with the big vision at some point, usually earlier on in the relationship, and then breaking it into quarterly or biannual discussions where we just come back. And granted, maybe business has been exploding, or maybe there's big trouble, or who knows what they might be dealing with. They might need to change the plan, but we can change the plan. At least we have something to kind of give feedback to and adapt from.
And speaking of business exploding or not during the pandemic, how has, I guess, first of all, how has your company, had to respond to the pandemic on your clients' behalf? And second, what if any complications or complexities have working at home, the vast increase in number of people working at home brought to to companies and their IT systems, from your experience?
Great questions. So we saw, for us, we have 2 halves of the business, as you alluded to. So on our IT division, we saw initially when the pandemic hit, everybody went home and we had a big increase in need. As everybody was moving home, some companies needed to upgrade their systems to handle, it could be phone systems so they could take calls remote, or just improve connectivity back to their office, or maybe they were working on desktops prior and needed to move to laptops and things like that. So there was a whole lot of need. Then we saw the opposite. Then April, May, things went down a bit for us. And I think it was based on everyone had moved home and people were trying to figure out their own new world order. The world effectively in general was more or less kind of on pause. I mean, I'm not saying people weren't working and doing things, but I think no one really knew what to do. And so because of that kind of general world slowdown, we saw a slowdown for, I would say, a period of 30 to 60 days, April through May-ish. And then as the world started to semi-come back a little bit, we saw a big increase getting people back to office or hybrid, where, and we still see that now. A lot of our clients are either optional, some are still remote, there's some that are all back. It's really, I'd say for us, we've seen a split 50-50. But the IT company for us is always kind of a steady in the storm. I've been doing this over 20 years, and it's always, no matter what's happening in the economy, IT is usually needed, and it might change what we're up to. Instead of doing projects, if the economy's slow, we might be doing more maintenance. But it's usually a steady ship. The other side of our business, we deliver event technology to big corporate events across the country. And obviously, as we know in this economy, nobody is traveling to big events. They don't exist right now. So that side got decimated. But we reinvented ourselves as a virtual production company for virtual events. And that's been going really well and has been super fun. So we've been learning a lot from these things. In terms of handling things for our clients, on the IT side of the world, unfortunately, we've seen, fortunately or unfortunately, depending on, we've seen our clients are just in just about every industry. We've got manufacturing, restaurants, law firms, salon and spas, consulting firms, etc., car dealerships. And some of our clients are booming right now and they can't keep up. We have one client who's 5 times their annual revenue, and they're not a young company. So it's just crazy. And so there's been so much work there. And we've got some of our other longtime clients who are have either ceased to exist or are struggling because of whatever they were in. Maybe they were in some hospitality sector and they're just having a really hard time. And so we've seen kind of across the board, some clients are kind of unfazed. They're basically still doing what they always did. They're just maybe doing it from home. So it's kind of been ups and downs and all over. And so I guess to answer the question, we've both done some technology things in terms of we kind of added some services around. We were doing temperature scanners at client sites that will send alerts when people walk in. If people have a high temperature, it sends alerts. And we've got some other technology we've added. We have automatic vending machine dispensers and things that we've added to kind of our arsenal to fill in gaps that people needed during this time. And then just in general, we found that, obviously people moving from home and now this hybrid work environment that many of us are in, where some of us are home and some of us are at work and we all have to work together. It's Microsoft Teams and Zoom and phone systems that are virtual and that you can, use on your computer and on your cell phone, and all these ways so people don't need to care anymore where we are. We just need to get the work done, and I think that's what we've all learned from this pandemic. So it's using the technologies, and thankfully there are so many things out there. And then Microsoft and Zoom and others have improved things during the pandemic to make the tools even better. So it's been a lot of that implementation, which we're seeing getting even better and better from both Microsoft, Zoom, and others. So that's been really great.
So let me go to a question that I'm interested in your opinion on. I've been an adopter of cloud-based tools. So Dropbox, ShareFile, a whole bunch, right? And recently I had an issue with ShareFile where I thought I was saving stuff and I wasn't saving it properly, but it wasn't telling me that, so I just assumed that it was. And then I had a conversation with a friend of mine, so I lost the information, basically, let me down. And then I had a recent conversation with a friend of mine who's like, I don't, cloud, I don't trust it. I do everything on a server, my own servers or my own hard drives or whatever. And it made me think to ask you, cloud versus internal server, where do you come down on that for businesses?
So unfortunately, the answer is it depends, but I'll give you a better answer than that. So part of it is that cloud is just kind of this big term that we're all using, right? And basically the answer is cloud just means that it's hosted somewhere on the internet. But cloud could mean that it's sitting in my basement. Cloud could be it's sitting at Google, right? And we're at very different things if it's in Dave Stamm's basement or if it's in Google's cloud. We have a very different approach. But technically to the client, either of those would technically be my data stored in the cloud.
And Google's so Google's cloud is a warehouse with servers instead of your basement with a server. Correct.
And Google and Amazon and other big players have multiple data centers where inside these buildings, there's hundreds to thousands of actual physical servers. And then each of these buildings across the world are connected to each other. And some of you may have seen Microsoft just had a submersive in a submarine, a data center, because they figured out that it's better for the environment. They can run it underwater cooler. It's a lot less energy to run it. And they're running a data center underwater. If you Google it, it's just an amazing story. And they think they're going to actually start putting some data centers underwater. At any rate, yes, Google has these big data centers all over. So instead of it like a single server running in my basement, let's say, just like you'd have a single server running in your office, when you're in a big cloud provider, Google, Amazon, and other big players, you're really, when they say you're in the cloud, your data is spread out across all of these servers. It's duplicated multiple times, and they've got all these kind of fail safes depending on how it goes. So for the answer, my answer usually is most of the time, and I think of myself, right, aside if I wasn't in IT and I own a business and I have 50 employees, most of the time I want to have things in the cloud. And the reasoning is it's just less, but a bigger cloud, it's just less for me to own. It's less for me to worry about. Whatever my IT function is, whether it's a company like me or it's a one-man show or a small team, those people still have to make sure that stuff is all running well. And if you move it to a bigger cloud provider, you're paying a monthly fee, but that provider should be handling that and probably is handling it at a level above what a small team could provide, right? However, all that being said, there are several recurrent reasons why small businesses can't move everything to the cloud, right? So there's some no-brainer things like email. Almost every business should have their email in the cloud because you want to make sure your email is always running, right? If everything else at your office went down, but your team could get to your email, they're not going to be thrilled, but they're probably going to be pretty happy because they can still communicate with their team, they can still communicate with their customers and their prospects, and they can still communication is key. In the old days, when people had email servers in their office, you know, it was bad because if that went down, they couldn't communicate with anyone and it was code red, right? So now, but the bigger issue is that depending on what business you're in, if you're in a company that, let's say you're an architecture company and you have big CAD files, or you're a creative agency and you've got big creative files in Adobe Suite, or you're a video editing company, you've got huge files, or even, you know, from your podcast, you've got these big audio files. When you start putting that stuff in the cloud, it gets hard because in your office, your network speed is it's like plumbing. You're using pipes, whether it's a wireless pipe or it's in a physical wired connection, it's a pipe. And so in your office, you're probably on like a gigabit network. Gigabit is 1,000 seed pipe. Well, if your internet in your office is only a 10 meg internet, that pipe is only 10. So your office normal is 1,000 and your pipe to your internet, let's say, is 10. So if you decide to put everything in the cloud, instead of communicating with everything at 1,000, you're communicating with everything at 10. And so now you've got this bottleneck. Now, for people that are small offices using Word, Excel, PowerPoint, PDF, and that's really all they've got, then storing everything in the cloud is totally fine because they don't need a lot of speed to get to those small files. But if you work with any large type of files and you've got a lot of people in your office, you either have to have very fast internet to support that, or it makes more sense to keep some of those big functions in the office and keep some of the other functions out. So at least doing some form of cloud makes sense, I think, for everybody, especially for email. But depending on your industry, you have to figure that out. Now, that will shift quickly as internet gets faster. So if we all pay the same price we do for whatever internet we have now, and 2 years from now, that speed at a minimum is 1,000 speed, which is the same as our in-office. Once we hit that level, that kind of apex where the internet speed for the same price we're paying now is the same price or is the same speed as our office internal speed, then there's no reason to really have things in the office, aside from some industries will have security and HIPAA and other concerns that they'll have to address. But for the most part, then it would make sense for almost all small businesses, in my opinion, to move almost everything out to the cloud because they won't have much of an advantage to leave it inside their office. And I think that day is coming quickly. You know, if any of us on listening to this, you know, are looking at buying physical servers, it probably makes some sense, but it might be the last time you have to worry about this because most servers last 5 to 7 years. So by the time we'd have to deal with it, if we were buying one now that we'd have to deal with again, most of us probably will be living in the cloud 100% by that point, I would think.
Okay, and that pipe thing is a great visual. I appreciate you sharing that. It made me think, you know, now, particularly in the manufacturing environment, and probably a lot of others, even distribution and trucking, everything, this Internet of Things, which essentially is now, you know, if you buy a new refrigerator, it can connect to the internet. My garage door opener connects to the internet, you know, doorbells, and basically every single thing is on its way and will eventually be connected to the internet. And that makes me think in a business environment, that's just, you know, you've got that pipe issue and you say, well, speed could help with that, but you're going to keep compounding the number of things that you're jamming into that pipe too.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely. And you're only going to need faster and faster internet, right? Because, and thankfully, like even wireless internet's getting so much faster. We're on the apex of 5G being here, and Apple, you know, sorry, dating this podcast now, Apple released the iPhone 12 this week, which has 5G capabilities. I think it's the first common phone that'll have that. And now you'll be able to get crazy fast internet speeds. I was talking to AT&T the other day, and they were saying that they now have an internet service in some of their major market cities where they can get on their wireless AT&T 5G, they call it ultra wideband 5G. They can get 4,000 download speed and a 200 and something upload speed, just crazy off the charts that we would never have seen a year or two ago. So yes, you're right. All this Internet of Things are going to need it. And I think all of us, now that we're putting all this stuff in our home, right? Like you can tell Alexa or whatever you use that you want to open your garage door and, you know, turn on my lights. We all are going to want this in our businesses too. And it's all coming. It's already here, but it's just not being adopted as fast as what we're doing in the home. So we're going to see all this stuff coming, of course, right? If at home it's an amazingly automated experience, why won't you want to do that in the morning, you know? Instead of someone having to go turn on all the lights and leave every day and turn the lights off. And, you know, I know we do some motion sensors, but think about what we could be doing. It could know which office at what time everybody comes in, and it could have things waiting, and the coffee could be ready in the office. All these things that we're used to at home within the next year or two will all be being adopted at work. And bigger than I think even the concern about bandwidth, which is yours and correct, is going to be security concerns. Because this security at work these days with ransomware and all these other problems is such a big deal. Now we're going to have all these new devices with less security that are going to be on the office networks and have to be addressed. So I think the big concern on the Internet of Things at work is going to be security.
Okay, well, that's a topic that's probably worth a podcast all on its own. Dave, I really do appreciate you coming today to join us and talk about IT in general and managed IT in particular. First of all, what area? I mean, how far of a reach can the Stamm Technologies have? Like, you're based in Milwaukee, but can you work with firms that are anywhere, or how does that work?
So our focus is to support clients that have headquarters within Milwaukee, Madison, or the Chicagoland areas.
Okay.
And then some of our clients have single offices. Some of the clients have multiple offices. We have several clients with multiple offices across the United States, some with a few foreign locations that we support as well. But what we have over the years, we have found that what fits us best are clients that at least have a headquarters here, so that our primary relationship, is somewhere within a 2-hour driving distance of our office in downtown Milwaukee.
Okay.
And that's how we focus. Client-wise, we handle just about any industry, and our focus is really on companies with 500 computers or less. So we really look for small to mid-sized companies. And within that number of computers, we've got companies that have, again, 0 IT people and we are their full resource, or we've got probably our largest company in terms of staff has 7 full-time IT people and we are still there for supplemental support. So it really just depends on, industry and really what their vision of how they want to have IT handled is.
Okay, got it. And if someone wants to get a hold of you or your company, what's the best way to do that, Dave?
Thanks, Mike. My email is dstamm, S-T-A-M-M as in Mary, at stammtech.com. And the website is the same, stammtech.com.
Okay, excellent. Dave, thanks so much for joining us today. And I feel smarter, and I think everyone else will probably feel smarter as well. Much appreciated.
Thanks so much for having me on, Mike.